So how do you even begin to summarize a book that has shaped civilizations for over 1,400 years? It's a huge question, right? Well, today we're going to give it a shot, but with a twist. We're going to let the Quran speak for itself. We'll dig into its major themes, everything from its definition of God to its vision for society, and we're going to use its own verses as our guide. So let's just dive right in. You know, right from the get-go, the Quran makes this incredibly powerful claim. It doesn't start with once upon a time or some gentle introduction. Nope. It kicks off with a bold declaration of certainty. This is the book about which there is no doubt. That one line really sets the tone for everything that follows. We're looking at a text that, from its very first words, presents itself as a clear, unambiguous guide. All right, so here's the plan for our journey through the Quran's worldview. First, we're going to ask, what is the Quran according to the Quran itself? Then we'll get into the big one, who is God? After that, we'll look at the role of the prophets and zoom in on three key figures, Jesus, Moses, and Muhammad. From there, we'll shift to how the book lays out rules for society, and we'll wrap up by looking at the status of women. Okay, let's kick things off with that first question. We've heard that bold opening line, but what else does the Quran say about its own purpose? What's its style all about? So the Quran basically gives itself three main job descriptions. First, it calls itself a guide, something meant to pull humanity out of darkness and into the light. Second, it's a clarification of all things. It's there to provide answers. And third, it claims to be a divinely protected and incorruptible text. So you can see it's not presenting itself as just a collection of stories. It's positioning itself as a kind of manual for life. And the style? It's just as dynamic as its purpose. The Quran doesn't stick to one format. It's constantly shifting gears, right? 1 minute, it's talking directly to you, the reader. The next, it's telling a moral parable. Then it's giving a historical account of a prophet. And then it's laying down specific legal rules. This mix of styles is absolutely key to how it gets its message across. Now, all of these different styles and all of these stated purposes, they all funnel down to one central massive theme, the nature of God. This idea is the absolute heart of the Quran's message. Pretty much everything else in the book flows from this one concept. The key concept here is something called Tawhid, and that's a really important word. It doesn't just mean one God. It means an absolute, indivisible oneness. The Quran hammers this point home again and again. God has no partners, no family, no equals. He is the one, single, uncreated creator of, well, everything. But here's the thing, this idea of oneness isn't presented as some distant, abstract, philosophical point. The Quran paints a really vivid picture of God through all these different names and attributes. So on one hand, you have his majesty and power. He's the king, the almighty. But on the other hand, he's incredibly personal and compassionate, the merciful, the protector. And this duality, it's absolutely central to how the Quran portrays God. And this famous passage right here, which is known as the verse of the throne, just captures this whole concept perfectly. I mean, listen to it. It describes a being who is eternal, who sustains everything, who is never touched by sleep or fatigue. His knowledge and power just effortlessly encompass the entire universe. It's really one of the most powerful descriptions of God you'll find anywhere in the book. Okay, so if God is this transcendent, all-powerful being, it raises a pretty logical question, right? How does his message actually get to us, to humanity? Well, the Quran's answer is simple, through human messengers, or, as they're called, prophets. Now, the Quran is super specific about what prophethood, or nubuwah, is. The prophets are always chosen humans. They are not divine beings themselves. Think of them as a communication channel. Their job is described as being bringers of good tidings, promising good things for those who have faith, and also as warners, cautioning people about the consequences of disbelief. The Quran talks about this long, unbroken chain of prophets stretching all the way through human history. But it definitely gives special attention to a few key figures. So for our purposes, we're going to focus on how it portrays three of the most prominent ones: Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. This table really helps lay it all out for us. So you've got Moses, who's described as a chosen messenger who got the Torah, a book of light and guidance. Then there's Jesus, who's called the Messiah, and a messenger who came to confirm the Torah and was given his own revelation, the Gospel. And finally, Muhammad, who is identified as the messenger of God and the seal of the prophets, someone sent as a mercy to the worlds. Now, the Quran's view on Jesus is very, very specific. It absolutely affirms his title as the Messiah and his miraculous birth. but it also explicitly states that he is not the Son of God. And this really fits into the Quran's bigger picture, this idea that all the prophets, whether it's Abraham, Moses, Jesus, or Muhammad, were all part of one single continuous chain. And every single one of them came to reinforce the exact same core message: worship the one God.
All right, so we've talked about belief, we've talked about history, now the Quran shifts gears and gets into practice. It starts to lay out a real framework for how people should interact, for the foundations of a just society. So let's take a look at some of those core principles.
What you're seeing here are some of the key ethical rules that pop up again and again throughout the text. There's a huge emphasis on justice at every level, on keeping your word, fulfilling contracts, on being totally honest in your business deals. And it also lays down rules for just getting along, like avoiding slander and backbiting. And crucially, it sets up a social safety net, commanding people to take care of the most vulnerable, especially orphans and the poor. And this verse right here, you could almost call it the mission statement for the Quran's entire social vision. It's like the whole ethical system packed into one sentence. It commands all the things that build a healthy society: justice, good conduct, taking care of relatives, and it forbids everything that tears a society apart: immorality, bad conduct, and oppression. It's incredibly concise. Okay, a really crucial part of this social vision, and honestly, a topic that gets discussed a lot, is the status of women. So for our final section, let's dig into what the Quran itself has to say about justice, equity, and the relationship between men and women. The text frames the ideal marriage in really deep, emotional, and spiritual terms. This verse, for instance, talks about spouses being a way for each other to find Sakina, which means tranquility or a deep sense of peace. And the bond that holds them together, it's supposed to be defined by affection and mercy. This really sets the intended tone for what the family unit should be. And it's not just about the ideals of marriage. When it gets down to actual laws, the Quran often speaks directly to the rights of women, especially women who are in vulnerable situations. This verse, for example, is part of a whole section dealing specifically with female orphans. It commands that they be treated with justice, especially when it comes to their property and their rights in marriage. It's a very specific legal protection for a group that, historically, could be easily exploited. And this all brings us to a really fascinating question, one that readers and scholars have wrestled with for centuries. On the one hand, you have these big, broad, universal principles in the Quran, like justice and mercy. But on the other hand, you have very specific laws for a particular time and place. So the great challenge, the enduring question, has always been about the relationship between the two. How do those universal principles shape how you understand and apply the specific laws? That, right there, is the fundamental question at the heart of Quranic interpretation. Thanks for joining us.